Today we are talking about SharePoint and OneDrive, a part of our Fortify 365 product. If this is your first time tuning in and you're asking, "Well, Eric, what in the world is Fortify 365?" It is literally a service that I coined for securing the Microsoft 365 tenancy. So we are fortifying the 365 tenant to a standard that an organization goes through. And if you missed any of the first 6 episodes, they are on YouTube. You can definitely go through and look at those and kind of go from there, and kind of get caught up. This is phase one of our series of any framework that we do. That most of the stuff that we're showcasing is typically just CIS version 8, which is something I highly recommend for any and all businesses just getting into the industry of securing your environment, messing with documentation, which is not part of this web series. Maybe I'll go create another one's like how to document your CIS environment or whatever, create policies. I think it's a little bit outside of scope, but we'll figure that out later. And whether they're doing the CIS, they're doing NIST CSF, you're doing 800 NIST 853 or 800 or 800 171, also commonly called CMMC 2.0 these days. But this is phase one of any of that deployments that we typically do and kind of go through that. If you are on Zoom, the chat is available for you. Please make sure you use the Q&A that's there. We do have a spot in the back toward the end of this one, and time permitting, this one will be a shorter one, so we should be able to get any of your questions in time. So with that, let's get started. Of course, who am I? My name is Eric Taylor. I am the founder and chief forensic operator here at Barricade Cyber, where our mission is to make your business more secure tomorrow than you are today. As I say before, we are in episode 7 with SharePoint and OneDrive. We have now gone halfway through, ladies and gentlemen. So hooray for that. Like I said, this thing is going to go into January, maybe February. I forget the exact timeline, but this is definitely, if you're just tuning in, a lot to catch up on, but still a lot of episodes coming up. Today we are going to be covering external sharing, and we're going to talk a little bit about the risk, link policies and expirations, access control and unmanaged devices, retention storage and sync restrictions, alert policies. We're going to show some documentations about GPOs for pushing OneDrive management. We're going to show the docs and link it here in the chat. A little bit stuff that a little outside of the scope for this one. This typically, in phase 2 or 3, but I definitely want to make sure that you guys are aware of those GPO policies that are available to you if you are in a hybrid environment. And of course, we're going to go into our live demo. So let's strap up. All right. First off, we're going to mess with the sharing of a lot of the sharing that's inside of the SharePoint. Now, so one-on-one, just real quick. Everybody, a lot of people who are new to Microsoft 365, they don't understand there is a difference in SharePoint and Teams, okay? If you're new, and forgive me if you've been here for a while and you've been messing with 365, this is mostly tailored to the new folks. Teams is a shell around SharePoint. Like when you're building up new channels, you're building up new forums, all that. SharePoint is the back end of Teams. Now, granted, yes, you have Teams calling, you have messaging, everything else, but on the back end of all of your documentations and everything you're doing inside of Teams, SharePoint drives that, right? So just know that there is an admin section still for Teams. There's an admin section just for SharePoint, and because of the functionality of each one, that's why they're going to be, I think, for a very long time, 2 different admin portals, because Teams is built on top of SharePoint. For those overseas folks, think of it as your VAT, your value added tax. And so like you take, I don't know, let's pick something random on my desk. Okay, we'll use this. Baseball, right? Typical baseball. Yeah, it's a little special thing. Um, sorry, drop something here. All right. So take this baseball, right? You can buy this baseball. At the core, it's a baseball. Now, I'm a huge Braves fan. So I'm sure to get the Braves stamped on there, that was a different processor. To get that image that's in there, that's probably not going to show up on there on the camera, which is fine. Um, that was a different person. So think of the baseball itself as SharePoint. Now we got call features, we got messaging, we got all this other stuff that makes Teams what it is. Okay. So real rudimentary type of concept, but that's what it is. All right. Let's get back to it. All right. So now let's go back one page. All right. So going into the sharing, setting your new and existing guests. And this is where a lot of folks have a lot of problems with is you you have your SharePoint, you have your OneDrive. Right now, external sharing by default is set to anyone. Users can share files and folders with links that do not require sign-in. Okay. What in the world does that mean, Eric? Okay, so I literally can share a file with this current setup with let's see, we got Mark Woodruff. I'll pick a guest off of Zoom here. So I share a link with Mark. He is not required to authenticate himself to view whatever document I'm sending him, Microsoft Word, PDF, Excel spreadsheet, whatever the case is. Windows is not activated. Yeah, because you're a new VM. Be quiet. Sorry. Mark is able to view any file that I send him. He doesn't have to authenticate with the Microsoft ecosystem. So that's kind of a bad thing because we just don't want information going out all free willy-nilly, right? We want to make sure that what is being shared, they are authenticating to. And why? There's two good reasons. One, we just don't want Mark to send that out and, you know, Bob Jones from down the road. Don't you trust me? Mark, I'm just picking on you because you're literally in the attendees, my friend. But we just don't want Mark to send it to Alex and send it to Jason and to Jonathan, and everybody else that's in his circle, and then they'll send it to Crystal and Dylan, right? So there, I picked on everybody in a bunch of names in Zoom, but we just don't want that information being shared out, right? So we want to control who is able to access it. We're going to say, boom, these are the people, right? So best practices, at least at first, is you're going to drive OneDrive down to new and existing guests. And this thing is always finicky. I don't know what, anything like that, but it's always doesn't want to move. So we're going to go down to new and existing guests. Guests must sign in and provide an authentic verification code. So what's end up happening is I'm going to share it to Crystal. When she sees that link, she's got to say, authenticate with her Microsoft 365 credentials, whether it's live.com, hotmail.com, whatever is in the Microsoft ecosystem to authenticate herself, right? It doesn't have to be an M365 tenant. So she must authenticate herself and then she can view the content that I'm sending her. If you want to get a little bit more restrictive, you're going to go down to existing guests, only guests already in your organizational directory, AKA. So anytime you you share files with somebody, 365 creates a literal account for them that's called a guest account on your Intra ID. And they are inside of your organizational directory as a guest account. So existing shares that you've already shared content with, they're allowed to still get new content, right? But you're not allowed to add new people without prior authorization. And we'll talk about some of that stuff a little bit later. But, if you decide, nope, we're not sharing anything that we haven't, no new guests are coming in, we're not doing any new sharing of our SharePoint or OneDrive files, that's it. More restrictive, only people in your organization, no external sharing is allowed. Now, if you're going outside of the CIS version 18, then most of the time you're going to be in this setting. You're going to have an external application, Box, Citrix Dropbox, send securely, whatever, insert external vendor here that you're going to use as a drop bucket for external sharing, right? Maybe even as a SFTP server. So you're going to go through that, and then figure out where in that metric or matrix you are going to be in, right? So at the very least, do new and existing guests must sign in. That way, you can continue sharing with Bob Jones and whoever else you want to, but they're going to at least have to authenticate into the tenant. Okay. I strongly recommend at least going to existing guests. We're not letting anybody else new inside the environment, and then start going through your Entra ID and looking at existing guests and like, um, we really don't need these people still in our tenant, so you can remove them as a guest. All right, guest enforcement. So when you open up your sharing, sorry, I didn't even share this link with you, ladies and gentlemen. And let me actually modify this just a tad. And it's not to be an adult term with those X's. You're going to replace those X's with your URL. Okay. So everyone has a specific one. So whatever, like in this particular case, ours is 45365 dash admin. So it could be, Bob's Pizza Shack, Joel Belton's Ice Cream Shop, whatever the case is, but your tenant ID dash admin.microsoft.com. Okay. So when you open this link, this right here is the not expanded by default. Why? I don't know, but this is what they do. Now, if you are like me and I go uber crazy and I say only people inside of your organization, this disables this. Okay. So relaxing that a little bit, if this will let me do it. Come on. Like I told you, I always have problems with this. Just go up. We'll just refresh. Oh, now it finally did it. Go figure. Yep, live demo, exactly. This is not rehearsed by any means. All right. Now you can get more advanced, right? And this is actually where we are. This is just in full disclosure. I don't talk about this very much, but we do have to share some content out. And this is where most of our organizations outside of some three-letter agencies that we help sit in. But if you're in, the GovCloud and stuff like that, you're not in this one. You need to be only people in your organization. But you can limit your external sharing by domain. So it's like, okay, existing guests, and then we're going to start adding domains. Now we can just block, say, we don't want anybody in, from Gmail, not picking on Google or anybody with a Gmail account, right? And if I can type, so anybody that is a guest account on our tenant with a gmail.com, you're no longer allowed to sign in. Same thing with only allowed. Now I don't think we can do this. Let me check. At first there was no, yeah, so it still is. I know that this is supposed to be on the roadmap where you can block certain domains, but then allow some. It's really crazy, but it's either one or the other. I'm not sure why some people would do that, but it is. So take that for what it is. You block your domain of ones that you want. What I typically tell people when we're going through this exercise, we will start blocking any free of publicly available email address. All right, so we'll block the Google, or the gmail.com. We'll block the um, Hotmails, the live.com, the Proton, the this, that, whatever. And then we'll dial it back a little bit to where we are now saying, okay, only specified domains are allowed to have access. So this is where you want to get your organization to. If you're going down that rabbit hole, that's exactly what you want, right? So we'll just say barricadecyber.com because you trust us, I hope. But anyway, if you want more control, which I highly recommend depending on the size of your organization, only allow users in specific security groups to share externally. Now, typically what you would want to do is create a new security group and just say, external sharing. And you'll just add that user to the group and then kind of go from there, right? And then whoever has that group tag is allowed to do the external sharing. Typically, the C-suite and potentially your IT administrators, things of that nature. But your mileage may vary, right? Allow guests to share items they don't own. Absolutely not. And this is kind of, if I refresh this page, you'll see this is allowed by default. All right, when we expand this, allow guests to share items they don't own. Absolutely not. No, we don't want that. All right, we have potentially sensitive information in here that we do not want to be shared out. And everybody's like, "Oh, we don't have sensitive information." I could tell you with high confidence, there's probably HR documentation. There's company PII that's living inside of your SharePoint and or Teams. It's going to state the facts, ladies and gentlemen. So we don't want that stuff going out, and we don't want anybody to have access to it. Now, guest access to a site or OneDrive will expire automatically after this many days. Highly, highly, highly recommend it because let's just be honest, ladies and gentlemen, we all get busy. Even myself, I can't tell you how many times I've recently gone in to see, do we have guests in our tenant that we need to expunge? No. Why? Because I literally have this set for 15 days. I don't have to worry about it as much. They're already getting removed in 15 days. It's kind of a little bit of automation policy, right? They'll still have a guest account in your tenancy, but they won't be able to access any of your shared information. Okay, so it is two different things. So just please be mindful of that. People who use a verification code must re-authenticate after this many days. I typically, or I put in my tenant 5. Okay. So I'm over paranoid. I am very much a tinfoil hat individual. So definitely, I put that as a 5 and then they can be able to do whatever they want to. Most of the time it doesn't really affect a whole lot these days because most of our vendors were working inside of their tenant and we just trying to make sure we don't put anything, in their Google Doc or something like that may be potentially sensitive. So, all right. Again, if you have questions, make sure you put them in the Q&A. I do see some that are coming in that we'll be taking a look at here momentarily, but we'll go into file and folder link settings. If you can't tell, we're pretty much in the same portal, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so just scrolling down here a little bit, file and folder links, choose the type of link that's selected by default when users share files and folders, blah, 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 blah. Again, this kind of I don't know why they do some of this, to be honest with you, because when you do, like we talked about a moment ago, the allow certain users, you're pretty much setting this up as well, right? Choose a link, or choose a type of link that's selected by default when users share files. I don't know. We just set that I don't really understand, and I haven't for quite some time, exactly what this exactly means. because the way that this was always phrased, or the way I understood it, was when you say choose the type of link that's selected by default. So I'm like, what? I mean, you're sharing a document. It's like, are you doing like a vanity URL or something? I don't know, but whatever. But I haven't got a specific answer, and nobody's been able to properly explain that to me. So if you're in chat and you know exactly what the heck they're talking about here, let me know. Um, but typically, it's either we're just burying what we have up here down here. You know, only people in your organization, or if you have gone in and said certain users of a security group is able to share it, then we mimic that down here. So choose the permissions that is selected by default when sharing links. So by default, again, depends on what you're sharing, what type of business you're using. If you're in a more of a, um, if you're in a, trying to think of a use case scenario. So if you're in a let's just say you're a marketing firm, okay? Um, you are sharing out, information for collaboration. You're working with external vendors. We just went through, you're going through overvamps of our Barricade Cyber site if you haven't been there recently. Um, and we're sharing with external vendors. And, you know, you may want to give them edit, right? Because you're going to be putting your pictures and your comments and all this stuff, and you're going to want them to be able to edit and respond back and all that stuff. So if you're like in a marketing firm and stuff, edit is probably the thing you want to do. But if you're in an accounting firm and you're sharing links with external people, maybe your accountant or something, or your client, you may only want to give view permissions to it, right? So, um, your mileage may vary. Again, choose what content you have in OneDrive and SharePoint, and choose the adventure that makes sense for you. Choose expiration and permissions options for anyone with links. The links will auto expire. This is not the same as the guest access. You would think it would be, but it's not, right? So, but I typically do mimic this particular thing. Am I diving in? No. Okay. Links will expire within this many days. I typically, whatever I put or what I recommend, if you're setting guest access to a site or OneDrive, let's just say hypothetically, like I stated before, if you're doing 30, I guess I got grandfathered into something because I have 15 on mine, but apparently this new tenant you only can do 30. But whatever you're mimicking up here, then do it here, right? If your guest can't get into it anymore after a certain amount of time, you might as well just make the link invalid. Does that make sense to everybody? Like, why would you have a different expiration on the link if the users aren't able to access it anymore anyway? So, these links can give permissions to view and edit or view. And if you want them to be able to view, if you just want them to be able to view, if you want them to view and upload, if you want them to view, upload, and edit. And that's more, in a collaborative fashion, right? So, yeah. Other settings show owners the names of people who are viewed their files in OneDrive. Absolutely. Thankfully, this is set on by default. I will tell you 2 years ago, maybe 3, this was not defaulted at all. So make sure that is. So if you have an older tenant, this may not be on there. Let site owners choose to display the names of the people who viewed files or pages. A lot of times you can see the change history and stuff like that for your change management. Use short links for sharing files and folders. Yes or no. It's all inside of Microsoft's ecosystem, right? So you'll be fine. And if you have any questions about that, definitely put it in the Q&A. Before I go on to the next topic, let me see. If you're limiting to, comes from Mark. If you're limiting to external guests, how would you add new organizations, change it to new and existing, add the new org users or lock it back down. Okay, if you're limiting to existing guests, how would you add a new organization? If we're only guests already in your organizational directory, so what you will end up doing in that particular situation is you'll have to start adding your domains for the new people. You could, depending on if you're trying to share with SharePoint and OneDrive, upgrade or downgrade the permissions or downgrade the security permissions in that specific platform to allow new. But typically by this time, if you've got to this level, you're adding, only specific domains are allowed to be inside of your tenant, right? Does that make sense? If I need a deeper dive, let me know and put it into the Q&A. All right, silently add users to OneDrive with Windows credentials. So this is the document for this. And the next couple slides are around GPO. So if you have a local domain inside of your environment, this is for you. If you have hybrid setup, and even if if you don't have hybrid set up, you really should have hybrid for this, but OneDrive will not automatically sign into on the workstation. You got to set up the GPO in your local AD. And this kind of goes through that, right? So the GPO will go through and actually set these registry keys for you, right? Now you can use a PowerShell script again. It kind of goes through, image prep. So if you're doing that golden image, these are the stuff that the registry keys you're going to delete, things of that nature, right? So you can kind of go through that whole process and get that set up for your specific use case. And that does make sense, right? Because right after that, which slide is that? Okay, I'm going to jump a little out of order because the next thing you're going to want to do is silently move known folders, your desktop documents, pictures to OneDrive, right? So you got the user signed in. Now you're going to want the people to be able to back this stuff up. We don't want users to have documents in both places. Let's just make it easy, especially in a ransomware situation, ladies and gentlemen, where you can easily recover some of these documents. Granted, it's not going to download or it's not going to back up the downloads folder. And there's a lot of stuff it doesn't do. But your desktop and your documents and your pictures, there's a lot of data that sits in there and can be potentially recoverable through restorations in OneDrive. So silently moving the known folders on the user profile over to OneDrive is very, very beneficial, right? So this is going to be in your GPO, group policy object, on your local domain, and this is going to walk you through that, okay? It's not very hard. I promise it's not. There's even, now that I think about it, if I remember right, you got to download this from OneDrive maybe? Okay, so they actually put it up here and administrator top. There's one for OneDrive only. This is where I got it. Okay. And I'll link this article here. So the ADMX template file is actually inside of your OneDrive account. So you can actually import that into GPO and be able to set this up. So, if this thing gets a little funky with the registry keys and stuff like that, you can actually import that in and be able to set that up, right? And push it out in a much more seamless way. From my understanding, if you have a newer domain controller running server OS 2025, I believe, it's already got that template in there. But again, correct me if I'm wrong. We do recommend keeping OneDrive files on demand. I think that is one of my next slides. Yep. So going into that to help save disk space on a user, because I mean, a lot of organizations, unless you have a very um, high-end end user that's operating a device, we're going to want to set this up, right? Um, I think this is actually the wrong link. It is. So we'll just go back here and we'll just click on this. Is it? Yeah. So what you're going to be focusing on is files on demand and storage sense. So the way this works, if you're not familiar with this, um, the storage sense is a Windows OS operation. So when if you configure storage sense for the workstation, when it reaches a certain threshold, like 80 or 85% of the drive being full, this will kick in and try to free up space. Um, Things that are old from your downloads, things of that nature. The files on demand is a very nice feature as well to help keep the drive uh, content small. The on demand just sets a small 5 KB file link inside of the workstation to say, hey, this file exists, but it's living in OneDrive right now. So when you click on it, it'll download it, and then you can be able to open it. So sometimes when you're navigating through your stuff and you're like, why is this so slow to open? Is it possible that it's as a on-demand file versus a locally hosted file? And that could be part of your problem. So your workstation is downloading it from the Microsoft ecosystem. It'll download it, and then you got to view it. And then depending on how you have your policy set up, I think ours is set for 30 days. If it hasn't been opened in 30 days, then it goes back into an on-demand status. So it will, remove it, leave that link file there, or create it as a link file, and then go to the Microsoft store. All right. And as always, verify settings that are in effect and working. Right. I can't stress this enough. Where, definitely any of these policies, you definitely want to, test, test, test. Thankfully, a lot of this stuff in OneDrive and SharePoint, at least in a lot of those clients that we've been working with recently over the past 60 days, we're not restricted to the Microsoft minute, where you click something and wait for 24 hours to respond. Typically, those two platforms, the policy is getting pushed out, and at least if the recipient is US based, it's been enforced typically within 30 minutes recently from all of our testing. So, play with it on a weekend and kind of go through and see, what's going on, things of that nature, right? All right, so over to Q&As. We do have one from Anna Alabido. I think the link defaults that you were unsure about refer to the actual link settings, which is set by default to anyone that's attached to every document. So maybe it's a way to apply even more granular control for each default for the file, so they're not only one certain. So this is all about the sharing. This is I can't believe I screwed this up. I'm so sorry. This is if you're sharing something out in Teams or OneDrive, like you're sharing an entire folder, you're sharing a Teams channel externally or a SharePoint site externally. So this is completely different. This is all about your links. This is actually your folder structure. Definitely reach out to us. Or over at barricadecyber.com. You can also go to fortify365.com. If you haven't seen that recently, I am really, really happy with the work that they put together on this thing. So you literally just go fortify365.com. I'm really liking this new site. Definitely reach out. Next up on the Fortify session 8, where we're going to be talking about Windows or Microsoft Defender for endpoint. And Register for webinars.barricadecyber.com, and also make sure you register for all the webinars that we do. And of course, like I said, the Brutally Honest Security Podcast. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I greatly appreciate y'all's time. Again, we will be doing this in 2 weeks, and we'll catch y'all later. All right, take care, all.